So we get all caught up in the word and, oh my gosh, that's like rigor mortis or that's all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, that's not, none of those things are true about rigor.
So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Unleashed Learning Radio for our podcast listeners. Now, if you're listening to this or watching this, you're committed to making learning stick for everyone. And today, we wanted to offer an episode asking all of us, how rigorous is the stuff we're working to make stick? Now, to help us think about rigor, we've got Dr. Barbara Blackburn on the show. Now, she's ranked as one of the top 10 global gurus in education, and she's dedicated her life to raising level of rigor and motivation for professional educators and students alike. Her latest book is out, which is Rigor in the Classroom. It's going to really help us think about not only how to make learning stick for everyone, but how rigorous is the stuff we're working to make stick. Here we go. Dr. Barbara Blackburn, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Radio.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
It's fun to talk to an American once in a while too. So nice to be doing this. So Barbara, like we were talking about before the episode started, what we do at Unleashed Learning is we put the system in place school-wide that makes learning stick for everyone. And what it does is it focuses the school's efforts on effective teaching and learning. It almost magnifies it. And the two things that I notice is that it lowers stress levels once the system gets into place. But the other thing that starts happening is we get to start talking about rigor because they start thinking about rigor and what is it we're really trying to get to stick. So the timing for you to be here is perfect. So welcome. So my first question, Barbara, is we talk about this idea of lifting the weights, right? It's this very specific idea about who's lifting the weights. And people start thinking about, well, what is on the weights, or what are the weights we're having them lift, which is a rigor conversation. So I thought we'd start by, can you define rigor for us? What does that mean?
Yeah. And I've spent almost 30 years researching rigor. And it started when my graduate students, I was working with teachers coming back to get a master's degree, asked me exactly that question. They said, what is rigor? Our principals are telling us that we are supposed to be doing rigor in the classroom, but they can't tell us what it is. So I really began to work hard researching not only what it is right now, but what should it be? And so my definition of rigor is that rigor is creating an environment in which each student is expected to learn at high levels, each student is supported so he or she can learn at high levels, and then each student demonstrates high expectations. And when you think about that, those four components really blend together to support good instruction. First of all, you've got to have an environment. Yes. If you don't have a classroom or school that is motivating to students, that feels safe and secure, if you don't have an environment like that, you're not going to be able to do anything else.
Absolutely.
So you've got to pay attention to that. Yeah. And I think y'all start with that background before you get to this point. Then you've got to have high expectations. So if I don't believe you can work at rigorous levels, nothing else matters, because you're not even going to try. You'll prove me right if I think you're not a good student. And so you've got to have those high expectations. I need to expect that you can do something that involves critical analysis. I need to give a task that expects you to work at a higher level. So, for example, let's take a maths one, because math is one of those things that people tell me all the time, well, I just have to give them problems. What do you want me to do? Well, here's what I want you to do. Let's say that we're working with multiplication. We're going to go pretty basic. You normally would give a student 10 maths problems. What I'm going to ask you to do is give them 8 computational problems. And then I want you to give them one that has 3 maths problems that are multiplication that are already solved. And what the students do is they have to figure out which one is incorrect, solve it correctly, explain why it was incorrect, and explain why they know it's correct now. having to recognize and explain misconceptions is a higher level of an expectation. That's what rigor is. It's not giving them 20 of something.
Mm.
So people just look at me like, well, you're not telling me to change everything I do. No, I'm not. There's a place for doing computational math, but there's also a place for kicking it up. And so that's what the expectations look like. The next piece is that the higher the level of expectation, the higher the need for support.
Yes.
Anytime you do something that's rigorous, you need support. You know, I would ask your viewers and listeners to think about their first year as a teacher or as a leader. How many of them needed help? How many of them had a question that they needed somebody else to answer?
I did.
Yes, I did. That's a rigorous task, and you needed support to be able to do it. Why do we think our students are any different at all? It amazes me. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. There's lots of things you can do for support, but it can be as simple as chunking information.
Right.
And I will have teachers tell me, well, but my students are old enough, they shouldn't need me to chunk it.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Don't you hear that? Okay, so here's my question. I'm just going to ask you. You're going to be the stand-in.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Have you ever used Google Maps, Apple Maps, GPS, anything like that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say you're going somewhere new that you've never been before, and Google gives you all the directions at once and never repeats them. How do you feel about that?
Overwhelmed. Yeah, overwhelmed.
That's how students feel. We need information chunked. Why would our students not?
You know what I'm thinking? I'm sorry to interrupt for just a second, but I'm thinking about when I moved to Australia because I was completely overwhelmed and I didn't know the codes. And I've got a doctorate in education. I didn't know the codes here. And I needed people to scaffold things for me. I needed people to chunk things for me. I needed people to, all the things you're describing for Google Maps was my experience here. And the only reason I got my footing was there were people who were doing exactly what you're talking about for me and with me.
Yeah. And again, what I hear teachers say to me sometimes, or principals say to me sometimes is, well, but that's not rigor. Rigor's making it harder. No. Rigor is much more complex than that. It is the expectations, but it's also the support. You cannot separate out the support. It absolutely is critical. And then students have to demonstrate the learning at a high level. If I use that math problem, but the students just skip it, or all they do is pick that B was incorrect and they don't explain it and justify it, they didn't demonstrate that they understood things at a high level. So you've really got to have all of those aspects if you want a student to truly accomplish rigorous learning.
It makes me think I'm taking my interview questions for you, and this sounds rude. I don't mean that, okay? But it's like this. I think it's non-rigorous is linear, and rigorous is the complexity. It's like seeing something from so many different angles, and that's also what makes it sticky. It makes it really sticky because what you're asking is a complexity of the kind of engagement. And also what you're saying is what the teacher believes matters a lot, and the environment we're creating really matters. So connects to what we talked about at Unleashed Learning. That's why we're excited that you're here. So why do you think rigor is so important in education?
Because to me, it's the heart of teaching. Okay? Yeah. To me, rigor is about taking a student from where they are and moving them to a new level. And that's why I became a teacher.
Yeah.
So we get all caught up in the word and, oh my gosh, that's like rigor mortis, or that's all this other stuff. And I'm like, no, that's not, none of those things are true about rigor. Not if you really get into it. It is about crumpling it up and having the depth. I think about it being, instead of a line, it's overlapping circles where you're really taking all of these things and building and building and building, and you're getting this heart. Yeah. My dad, who was my first and best teacher, he always told me that the best definition of the purpose of education was given to him by a third grade teacher. And she said, the purpose of education is to teach students how to figure out what to do when they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what rigor is, because we live with that every single day. If your power went out, we would have to figure out what to do. If I get up in the morning and my car won't start, I have to figure out what to do. And so we make hundreds of decisions all the time, but sometimes we don't equip our students to do that.
That's right. It becomes very task oriented, task completion. And this is the stuff also that makes learning the real stickiness, rather than we got through the assignment, I got a B on it, and then I threw the paper away, I don't remember what it's about. This is the stuff that's really creating its stickiness. So I think one of the things that was great about the book is the myths piece. So can you give us briefly, like, what are some of the myths about rigor? Because I'm sure the audience is going in a positive way. They're thinking, well, yeah, but it means this or whatever. So what are some of the myths?
Couple of the big ones, because we're not going to go through all of them,
Yeah.
but we'll do a couple of big ones. Probably the number one is that rigor is more. Rigor is giving more homework. Rigor is doubling the homework. Rigor is giving more problems. And I will tell you, parents are the worst about that, because they think that's what rigor is. If their kids come home with 5 pages of homework instead of 1, it is not about more. It is about quality, not quantity. And when you talk about lifting the weights, it's not, can they lift a 200-pound weight? It's, can they lift a weight that is quality,
Yes.
that they carry with them later.
Yes.
And so it's about the appropriateness of it with the quality. I also don't want to give them a 5-pound weight, because they can do more than that. So but it's not quantity. That's number one.
Yeah.
The second one I get is that rigor is only for.
Yes.
So out here, rigor is only for honor students. Rigor is only for advanced students. Rigor is not for students with special needs. Rigor is not for primary age students. They're not for year 1 students. That's not true. Rigor is absolutely appropriate for everyone. I just today was working with a school district here, and we looked at a kindergarten math example that was the premise that I had just explained to you earlier, but it was simplified for kindergarten students. And the thing was, those kindergarten students who are 5 still had to recognize and explain misconceptions. It's just that they didn't have as many choices, and it was not as complex.
The purpose of the weights on the bar is to create muscle. And the kind of sticking we want is so that the muscle will last for years after our experience with them, right? And so the kind of rigor you're talking about means that it's not a weekend gym session. It's a gym session that's really, rigorous, but we're trying to get muscle on the body so that muscle lasts for years and years to come. That's that Google Maps analogy.
It is. I mean, I tore up my knee a few years ago, and I do some work with a physical therapist, and he has me put small weights on my ankles, but they're 15-pound weights. They're not, or they're 5-pound weights. Oh my gosh, I hate for them to be 15. They're 5-pound, not 15-pound weights, because what he needs me to do is get the maximum benefit. But he only has me do that maybe 10 or 15 times.
Right.
And I asked him one time, I said, well, do you not want me to do more, like 30 or 40? And he said, there's a point where you don't get any benefit out of it. You're just practicing for practice sake.
He's very intentional about the weightlifting he's having you do, because he knows how to get the muscle to expand.
What you said, he's a teacher. That's what he may be labeled a physical therapist, but he's a teacher.
Absolutely.
Why would we not be intentional about things like practice and the tasks we assign?
That's right. So you allude to this really well here, and I want to go to this one. I've been in more classrooms across Australia and the US than I can even imagine. I can't even tell you how many parents do. And what I'm very aware of is the inequity of rigor. And also the belief behind it, because you said that, like, oh, it's for the AP kids, it's for these people, it's for, So my question to you is, how do you think rigor is an equity issue?
I think it's probably one of the biggest equity issues, because if I choose not to offer you rigorous instruction, I am taking away your opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to never even give it to you. And so I am unbelievably passionate about the fact that rigor is for every single student. And anyone you choose not to offer rigorous instruction to, you are choosing to say they are not worth it. And I really believe that very strongly. And I say that having taught, when I was a teacher, I taught everything from gifted students to struggling students who were in a class because they were struggling students and their test scores were bad. For me to give up on them before I ever started, what does that say about me as a teacher? And so for me, it's very much an issue of choice as a teacher, that I choose to believe that every single one of my students can and will learn with my support.
It makes me, Barbara, what I always saw too was students were struggling. They actually put less weights on the bar. It was like, no, what I used to always say is kids would show up to school with all this muscle on their body and we go, look how strong they are. It was like, well, their parents had gyms at their house and they're PE teachers. And then you've got other kids coming with not a lot of muscle on the body. And we'd say, they're not very strong, so we're going to put less weights on the bar. I'm like, no, you actually need to put more weights in the bar, but you support them. And it wasn't preordained. It was actually contextualized why. And it's also making me think about the scaffolding is also the equity piece about this as well. So, okay, so let's do this one. You did that, but what can schools do to ensure rigor is for everyone at the school rather than just a few?
Okay, first thing is everybody in the building needs to understand what rigor is and what it looks like in the classroom. And we don't do that a lot. There are a lot of schools that they really are doing the more or just a lot of extra problems, those kinds of things, or they're excluding certain groups. So you got to understand what it is and what it looks like. That's what I spend most of my time doing is talking with people about that over the computer, generally, just making sure they understand it and showing them examples. I had a physical education teacher yesterday in one of my sessions, and he said, I don't think you're going to be able to show me what I can do as a physical education teacher, which is not the thing to say to me. Okay? For a lot of reasons, one of which is my dad was a health and physical education guy. So, that's the bad one to pick. But I've got examples for almost everything. And I immediately pulled up an example and showed him and talked him through what he could do to bump up the rigor in his classroom. And it was like a light bulb came on. And he said, well, I could do that. If that's all you're asking me to do, I could do that. And again, so many people don't understand it. So I think, one, you've got to really understand what it is and what it looks like. And then I think you got to practice that some, because probably the other thing I spend the majority of my time doing is teaching teachers how to craft tasks and assignments that are rigorous. And they begin to see what it is that they really need to do. And then you've got to put it into practice. And all of that is preceded by the fact that you've got to make a choice that you're going to be committed to your students.
Yeah.
And I am optimistic enough to think that everybody is committed to their students and growth. They just don't always know what they're supposed to do.
What I hear sometimes in the beginning is my students won't do that. And I hear a lot of that. My students can't do that. Or what's fun is when that's broken through and they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. But also when the student goes, I had no idea either. And isn't that why we're in the profession? That's the fun part where, when it's unleashed, that's why we call it unleashed learning, because it's bringing out of. So look, I think, Barbara, you really help us think about rigor, who is it for, those common definitions, but it also made me think about what we believe as educators, what we believe as leaders, what we believe in schools. So I'm hoping that this episode is going to help bring rigor to the next level of conversation for the people who we work with and the people that you work with. And as always, we'll let people know about your book. And I want to thank you for the work you're doing for this world, my friend. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. And I want to say that if you want more information, I'm not telling you not to buy the book. My publisher would have a fit. But what I am going to tell you is there's lots of free stuff on my website.
Fantastic.
Lots of articles on all kinds of topics, including motivation and learned helplessness. So just go to www.barbarablackburnonline.com and go to free, and there's plenty of resources there for you. So I'm all about making sure teachers get access to stuff quickly.
Rock and roll. Well, we'll share that with them. And from one side of the world to the other side of the world, thank you, my friend. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So now we want to hear from you. And our question is this: what's one thing you do to ensure rigorous curriculum in your classroom or across the school? So we're going to invite you to join the conversation below, and our team is going to select one answer to send Dr. Barbara Blackburn's book to. So for free, wherever you are in the world. So join that conversation. And when you're there, grab our free ebook to learn how to break through the roadblocks that stop good schools from becoming great schools.